Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pisgah Podcast.
It's your host, Drew and Mangler, and we're coming to you live this time from the railroad tracks on Star Gap.
Yep, we are sitting right on that railroad crosstie that's in your way if you jump the railroad tracks. So thanks for coming back. Drew, we have listeners now, and according to our data, 69% of them are listening via Apple Podcast.
Speaking of listeners, I don't think the leads were too happy with our discussion a few episodes ago, and they wanted to keep me quiet, so they set a trap for me the other night.
Oh, dude, what happened?
They conspired with a tree, and I surfed out my back tire that pointed me at an angle just right to clip my bar on a tree, and I high-sided and slammed my hip in my shoulder, but I'm okay, just stiff and sore. Got a good hematoma on my hip now.
Ooh.
Have any angry listeners been out to get you also?
Man, I try to stay neutral in the streets. I ain't trying to stir up some beef. But I did explore some new zone of trails out in the Cherokee National Forest area. A lot of it was somewhat overgrown, and my shins got whipped up pretty good.
Poor shins.
Yeah.
So for this week's news blurb, the 2021 Downhill Southeast schedule is announced, and hopefully we all stay healthy and get this virus behind us so we can actually enjoy our regions and, well, frankly, one of the country's best downhill series.
Yeah, it'd be really rad to get back to normal events. So the Downhill Southeast released their schedule, and the dates and venues are as follows. May 1st and 2nd is at Massanutten Resort. That's in McGaysville, Virginia, kind of in between Harrisonburg and Charlottesville. And then June 12th and 13th is at Snowshoe in West Virginia. July 24th and 25th will be at Windrock Bike Park, which is in Oliver Springs, Tennessee, a little bit west of Knoxville. And August 7th to 8th will be in the high country of North Carolina at Sugar Mountain.
These are super professionally run events, timed by Zone 4 timing. The categories are from first-time beginner to UCI card-carrying pro racers. The turnout in prior years has been growing, so they had to add some categories, which gave some new age groups and a few new juniors categories for the Groms. There's also been the addition of the single crown category for both Cat 2, 3, and for Pro 1.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have some events to look forward to for 2021, and also some events for us to go and cover. You know, all this remote podcasting is getting old. I want to hang out with our buds.
Yeah, me too. And I turned 40 in January, so should I begin a master's career?
Well, I'm not too far behind you. Is this our calling? Are we set to take over the Masters field of Western North Carolina races?
Well, with Santa Cruz's announcement today of the new Nomad, I could maybe have a sporting chance in the single crown category?
Yeah, that is a possibility. With its geo and the longer slacker, it's got potential to be a really fast enduro race bike. And quite frankly, a solid Pisgah ripper. I got Mike Colon at the hub to tell us a little bit more about the new Nomad 5.
So Santa Cruz has dropped their Nomad 5 today. Comes in a really classy looking ox blood with like gold graphics. And then their crazy color is adder green. It's a matte finish. And it's kind of like a Kelly green with pink down tube lettering.
Okay.
It's not going to be for everybody. That's the wild color. There's usually, one of those in
They throw that in the mix.
Totally. Build kit wise, it's going to start off with the R kit at $44.99, and you can load it up with an XO1 kit at $74.99. And you'll have the carbon reserve option on that bike that bumps it up another $1,200. So
Okay.
$86.99 is the high end, if you will.
Any Shimano build options?
There is a Shimano build option. It kind of sits right in the middle. The XT build at $61.99, and at that XT build, you can opt for the coil shock option.
Okay.
Coil or air from on the XTs and the XO1s. Some geometry numbers. Of course, much like a lot of the Santa Cruzes, not all of them, they have a little flip chip in there, a low and high position. In the low position, you're looking at a 63.7 degree head tube angle, and the high at 64. On the C-tube angle, you're looking at 77.5 in the low setting and 77.9 in the high. And on the large bike, you're looking at reach numbers of 472 in low, 475 in high.
With these bikes, are they doing incremental chain stays?
Yep. So chain stays and of course wheelbase will grow 5 millimeters with each larger size.
That's a little bit bigger than their previous ones with what, 3
Right.
millimeter?
3 millimeters on the 5010, and that's the first bike that they've ever done that on.
Okay.
So I think that's a industry trend that you're going to see more from other manufacturers as well. But looks like Santa Cruz moving forward is going to do that with the majority of their bikes. Of course, it's the low link driven design that you've seen on all of the bikes except for the Blur, I guess, over the last few years.
What's our shock options and fork options looking like?
It's going to be a beefy bike, as you know. One thing we didn't discuss yet, 27.5 wheels, front and rear, at 170 millimeters travel. So it really hasn't grown in the travel department, which I think, we're getting to that point now where, it needs to settle down a little bit. There's been some drastic changes on a lot of the bikes over the last several years, and things are kind of settling down a bit. Because of its beefy intentions, you're going to see 38 millimeter fork options across the board. The R kit will have a Zeb, and I believe the S kits and above are going to have Fox 38s. Ooh. Yeah, and then as you get the XT builds and above, the XT and the XO1, you'll get a coil option on the rear shock as well. So, it's going to be a pretty fun Pisgah bike, I would think.
Yeah.
And all of the area trails, I think, will, DuPont might be a little on the easygoing side for that bike. Canuga, it would be a great park bike.
Some of the lift serve spots as well.
Oh, yeah.
Beach and Sugar.
And then, of course, can't stop talking about Hot Springs. I rode there this weekend, and I don't get there often enough, and it's amazing. So it'll be great for over there as well.
How do you guys handle fitting them with the right coil?
The bike will ship with a specific coil based on the size. Large is typically a 500 spring, extra large is 550, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't always work out for the customer. So yeah, we'll work with them to get the right spring in there for sure.
Demo-wise, are you guys looking to add some of these to your demo fleet?
We are. We're hoping to see these things rolling in soon. But as you know, the industry's been kind of crazy this year, so there are no guarantees on when we'll have them in a rental fleet, but we'll definitely have them. Likely in a medium and large only. We do get requests for extra large bikes, but I think a lot of people that are looking for extra larges are looking for a 29er at that point too. So
I can attest to that.
Yeah. So being a 27.5 bike, I think you'll see medium and larges in our rental fleet, and hopefully sooner than later. We have them on order, just not sure when we'll see them yet. It's a big bike. It likely won't be for everyone, but those who are looking for a bike that can, handle the chunky stuff we have here, maybe do a little park riding, as we mentioned, over at Canuga, over at Beach, over at Sugar, I think this could be the bike for them. And you'll have the opportunity to ride them here once we get them in our rental fleet. So, hit us up and let us know if that's something you're interested in.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Mangwood.
I had a conversation with an out-of-town friend on a ride this weekend. She was surprised that Pisgah riders went for such long travel bikes.
Yeah, a lot of people that haven't ridden here just assume it's kind of mellowish terrain and are often quite surprised at how rough the terrain can be. 3 to 4 miles of a downhill full of large roots and rocks can definitely wear on you, so these 150 to 170 mil travel bikes can make that ride a lot more, shall we say, comfortable?
Yeah, I think comfortable is a good way to put it. And on the subject of comfort, that's kind of the theme of this week's episode. As humans, we like to be comfortable, whether it's mentally or physically. When it comes to pre- and post-ride rituals, a lot of riders enjoy a good meeting spot. It can be a trailhead, coffee shop, bike shop, or whatever, but just a good meeting place. So with the opening of the Old Fort Ride House, it's given riders a good starting point for all of their Old Fort-based adventures.
I got Joe Adams on the mic this week to talk to us a little bit more about exactly what the Ride House is and what his role there is.
I have worn a few different hats here over the course of the time in Kitsbow being in Old Fort, but pleased to be at the helm of the Ride House.
Awesome. Well, Old Fort in the past, to a lot of us, has just been this mountain town you pass through on the way to Heartbreak Ridge or to the bottom of Kitsuma or the Parkway. The biggest attraction being maybe Mr. Bob's Donuts. It seems to always be closed, though. How does the Ride House hope to change people's perception of Old Fort as just a drive-through town?
Well, I mean, for one, we are open at 7:30 a.m., so we're, definitely trying to help people get their day started in the right way. We're featuring local vendors like Four Sisters, like Stockwile Kitchen, Dynamite Roasters, and more. I mean, the list really does go on for being able to get sweet and savory goods, to get some of the best coffee around. More than anything, I mean, the Ride House exists to help people get outdoors, enjoy the outdoors, and enjoy their time in Old Fort. We think Old Fort is a hidden gem. It really is such a beautiful town. And for those who want to ride these trails, and in the future with the new trail development, there's a lot to come for more beginners, which appeals to me personally. We just want to be a part of that. We work with the U.S. Forest Service to get on message for trail development and maintenance and just general care. We want people to be able to not only enjoy, but also be stewards of the land. And so, yeah, I think ultimately just here to support a better outdoor life.
Awesome. Well, what does the Ride House's current customer base look like?
It's very interesting. I mean, it's a mix. We've been open basically August is when we opened. We get surprisingly more tourists than I expected from out of state. There are certainly some locals that come by and enjoy coffee with us and breakfast. We also serve a lot of the employees here. So a good bit of what I do is try to make sure that we're nourished and, there's a lot to enjoy. But yeah, it's quite a mixed bag.
Yeah, so with Kitsbow being more of a cycling-focused brand, will the Ride House stay cycling-focused or perhaps branching out into other outdoor activities?
We are absolutely cycling-focused. We're open to all. Now, we do have a visitor information center where we help people whether they're planning trips for hiking, running, or biking. As for product, we're certainly cycling centric, no question about that. But on the whole, we want to be open and available to everyone. I would just like to say too that, like, as someone who's not just been a cyclist myself, the functionality and durability of the clothing, the mission of Kitsbow as a whole appeals to me, even though I'm not a cyclist. Now, I look forward to the opportunity to grow and perhaps become a cyclist. But the clothing appeals to me regardless. I really appreciate also the mission of Kitsbow and the sustainability measures. It's been my experience that Kitsbow is doing the right things for the right reasons. And I see that happening again and again.
So, Kitsuma is one of the area's most popular trails, and it's pretty close to you guys. And for those that are at the top of the mountain, there's good food options, there's a bike shop. Was the lack of those things at the bottom down in Old Fort a driving motivation for the Ride House creation?
I may not be qualified to give the best answer to that, but from my perspective, I think that the Ride House creation was really driven by the culture of Kitsbow rather than a plan, a certain idea of like what to do for this development and what's lacking. It was just more about this natural fit for how Kitsbow's presented and that ability for people to come and try on. I mean, with that obsession with fit, it's a great thing to then have the ability to come in and try these things on. So we certainly encourage you even to come and try those icons on and like make sure you find your perfect fit.
Great. Well, what does the future of the Ride House look like moving forward?
Well, one thing in the works is the bike shop. So we have a seasoned and certified bike mechanic that works here as one of our rangers. He's helping to build out this bike shop. We will have essentially, the plan is to have enough to make sure that you can enjoy your ride. If you forgot something or something goes wrong, that you can still get out and about. Like, we won't sell bikes. We may at some point have a rental fleet, but generally speaking, just want to have some basic goods, make sure you can enjoy your ride, and then basic repairs available.
Okay, so speaking of rangers and mentioning food and coffee, what are the Ride House employee roles?
Yeah, it's interesting. We thought originally we would do like a barista and a ranger would be the primary roles, but those do tend to overlap. The ranger position is essentially the main position that everyone has some role in. So like the ranger, again, it's about helping people get outdoors. Now, we're also in pursuit of coffee perfection. So we all take pride in the beverages that we offer, as well as the food service. Though it's a lot of like grab and go. So we're not necessarily trained servers, and we're certainly not chefs, but we have wonderful food that we get from local vendors. And so for us, that ranger role and being a good host to all of our visitors is really important to us. We want the experience of everyone who walks in. We hope that they begin and leave with a smile, though it'll be hidden under a mask. We hope that they're smiling throughout their experience here at the Ride House.
Old Fort is obviously an older population where the younger population doesn't seem to stick around, they move away. What do the older citizens of Old Fort think of the Ride House?
We see a lot of gratitude, really. I mean, like the owner of Frisbees, for example, came in and he's just thrilled about Kitsbow, and we get a lot of that. I think that there are these unseen, unknown benefits to the jobs that have been created and what it's doing for the economy as a whole. I feel like there is excitement there. We're getting a lot of gratitude, and especially too within the PPE pivot. It's hard not to be kind of in awe of that gratitude and very much appreciative and just humbled by it.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that I'm curious about, and I don't know how if you're from the area or how long you've been here or where you're from.
Originally Roanoke, Virginia, but I've been in Asheville for 20 years, though.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but there used to be a Friday evening mountain music gathering in Old Fort up until maybe mid 2014-ish, and the organizers lost their arrangement with the property owners. And that ended a multi-decade event. Would there be potential to revive such an event with the Ride House?
I'm glad you asked that. Right now there's COVID, right? Thankfully, vaccines are on the way, and we look forward to being able to return to some normalcy around our ability to gather. That absolutely changes the ability to have music functions and tradition. Absolutely, we would love to help reinstate. I'm careful to say what we will and won't do, but absolutely. I mean, I play music. I love Appalachian music and heritage. I think that there's a lot of potential for not only carrying on the tradition, but also evolving to what more can come. I mean, for the youth.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Joe. Can our listeners find you at the Ride House on most days? Can we send them by to say hey?
Yeah, absolutely. Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday sometimes. Like we have some events and whatnot sometimes.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us on the Pisgah Podcast.
So for this week's discussion, Drew and I are going to run you through our cold weather riding gear.
We face some serious challenges when it comes to riding in the late fall to early spring around these parts. It could be 70 degrees or it could be 20 degrees, and sometimes it could be all of those in one single ride.
So Drew, you've been in these mountains a little longer than I have, so maybe you should kick this off. What's in your cold closet for those winter Pisgah rides?
Well, I gotta admit that I really hate being cold, and so I have to go hard with this. So for gloves are important to me because my hands, if once I lose feeling in them, I just can't ride a bike anymore. So I've been using the Brisker gloves by 100%. They're insulating and wind blocking on the front, and they feel like a normal mountain bike glove on the inside, and they are smartphone compatible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Socks are key. Socks are everything. If you buy one piece of winter gear, I gotta say this is the place to do it. You gotta have wool. You gotta have a variety of them. You gotta have different thicknesses, and you gotta have different cuff heights for different conditions. Just have a bunch of them. See which ones work best for you in different conditions, and you can't have enough of them.
And it's never a bad idea to take an extra pair of socks on a ride.
Yeah, especially if you have to cross South Mills River 13 times in one ride.
Ooh.
Bibs. So when it's really cold, I've got a few pair of 3/4 length bibs that are fleece lined. One bib that I have is made by Kraft, and it has wind blocking material over the knees and the front of the thighs also. Those are super key. I reserve those for the super windy days that's going to be really cold, and that might not be blocked as much by the trees. Or if I don't wear bibs, I will wear knee warmers. And I actually just got these. It's a new pair of knee warmers from Race Face with a knee pad, an abrasion pad over the knee warmer, and they're called the Charge knee pads. Uh, I like them a lot so far. I've only used them twice, but I'm becoming a big fan. And so base layers, much like wool socks, you got to have a variety for many conditions. I've got everything from long sleeve wool base layers, ones with mock turtleneck for warmth. I've got tank top ones that just keep your core warm. You can combine these with a jersey and a good wind shell, and you can get the most versatility for layering that I can imagine. And speaking wind shells, the one that I've been using for about 5 or 6 years now is made by Pearl Izumi, and I've had it for a while. It's got armpit vents and a vent in the back. Doesn't have much in the way of pockets, but that's what your SWAT or your hip packs for, whatever you're going to use that. So that's not too big of a deal. Headgear, I'm bald, so it's important to me. I'll wear a buff sometimes if it's really thin, and I've also got some wool cycling caps that cover ears and the back of my neck. Another thing that's just you got to try it out, and you got to have a variety for different conditions. And aside from all these, yeah, I've just got a couple of pro tips. One is that sometimes the piece of gear that's going to be best for your winter riding is not going to be a cycling brand. I found an outdoor brand called Sirius that makes something called storm socks that are windproof and water resistant, and they're really thin, and they go on over a very thin, like capline style sock. That way you don't lose your circulation in your feet, and they're going to keep your feet super warm and dry. And my other pro tip is just don't be scared to spend the money on good gear. I recently compared a $200 piece of gear to an $80 alternative, and I spent the $80 on the cheaper item, and it didn't work. And I wound up having to spend that $200 anyways.
Yeah, that's one of those buy once, cry once scenarios.
Yeah, and it made all the difference. Besides, when you spend that kind of money on riding gear, you kind of feel ripped off when you don't use it.
I mean, you're making an investment and it feels good when you do use it. So after our big cold snap we had a few years ago, when the high temps were like 25 and all the waterfalls froze, I got serious with investing in some good riding gear. We had a couple of different levels of riding gear based on temperature and perceived riding distance. For one, I pretty much go pants during the winter season for the most part. I'm also a bibs fan, so I have some winter bibs that come below the knee that I'll also sometimes throw my knee pads over. They're not fleece lined like yours, and that sounds a little extra cozier, so I might look into some of that. So for my pants, my above 30-degree pant is the nuke proof blackline trail pants. They come a little longer, which helps me as I have an extremely long legs. However, I would enjoy another 4 inches of length on them. If it's a little chillier, I may throw on some leg warmers under there too. But if it's going to be mostly low 30s and into the 20s, I'm going to break out the Pearl Izumi Summit AM FIB pants. If it's above freezing, these pants stay in the closet. They will cook your legs. But when you want to be out in the cold, cold, I love these pants for that scenario. Shoe wise, if it's below the mid 40s, I'm going to go with my specialized defrosters. These are kind of bootish, but they have an SPD mount, a boa, and a high ankle, and they're also waterproof. I'll adjust sock levels for the temps, if it's colder, thicker sock, longer cuff, whatever. But just different socks, I'll switch out. But I get cold feet, and getting these shoes has been a night and day difference in ride comfort. On my upper body, it's mostly more about layering. I have a Nike Pro Dry Fit cold base layer for colder temps, and then I'll switch out for various long sleeve moisture wicking shirts, and then I'll choose my coat based on temps. So anywhere from like a Patagonia Houdini to my Endura MTR Primaloft jacket. Glove wise, I usually take two pairs with me, especially if it's colder, but always a wind resistant glove. Some of the winter gloves will get my hands sweaty, so it's nice to have a dry pair to change into at some point. So it'll range from some hand up cold weather gloves to some craft shield gloves, which, while doing some research for this episode, I see they have a newer model out, the 2.0. Also, I'll throw a neck gaiter on or a buff, thickness depending on the temps, and I'll top it off with a little beanie under my helmet. You mentioned a wool over the ear beanie. That's something I'm going to have to research. I like the sounds of that.
Yeah, it's a really nice piece of kit, and a lot of brands make one, so it's not like you have to go for a specific one if it doesn't work for you. But you're right, though. Good winter gear is a buy once and cry once thing. Some of my better winter gear I've had for years, and it was a good investment. And on the topic of investing in clothes, Kitsbow, who has brought us the Ride House, has been churning out their custom-made apparel in Old Fort.
Kitsbow has been making a lot of waves in Old Fort. I reached out to their CEO, David Billstrom, to find out a little bit more on exactly what brought them to Old Fort, the PPE pivot, and, well, expensive mountain bike clothes.
My name is David Billstrom, and I'm the CEO at Kitsbow. And we're making clothes. We're the first new manufacturing operation in Old Fort in approximately 30 years. As of today, I think we have 57 people here working. We are almost exactly 12 months from when we did the ribbon cutting ceremony, inviting people into our building last December 13th. So we have been on full rock and roll for the last 360 days.
That's impressive. What came first, bikes or Kitsbow?
Really, bikes. Kitsbow's start came because there are high performance fabrics made into apparel for specific use in virtually every outdoor sport except for mountain biking. You know, professional road racers on bicycles have had the best fabrics, the newest fabrics, wicking, moisture, wind barrier, insulation without bulk. The same thing's true in climbing, skiing. Every outdoor sport has awesome clothes except for mountain biking. So in 2012, Xander Nosler was returning to mountain biking after being involved in cycling since high school. I think he built his first bicycle in college at Stanford for fun. And he was returning to the sport, and he realized that there were no good performance clothes. Everything was pretty cheap and not very functional. Just to give one trivial example, anyone who's worn cheap mountain biking shorts knows that when you stand up and sit down, you got to be careful that you don't hook the nose of your saddle into the opening of the shorts and get jammed up as you're trying to stand up again.
Definitely been there. I know that feeling.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things like that. And those problems have been solved in the other sports, but they hadn't been in mountain biking. So he formed the company to solve that problem. And with a couple of other wrinkles, he really likes nice clothes. So he wanted the clothes to be, as we like to say, timeless classics. So you want to be able to get off your mountain bike, throw it on top of your car, and then go into a bar and not look like one of those road cyclists, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Gotta want to look a little bit normal. And in certain rural areas in the United States, this is a safety issue, right?
Oh, yeah. Hands down, yes.
So timeless design, stylish, not fashion, but stylish, and highly functional, and using the best fabrics from anywhere. So really the cycling informed the clothes. Another thing we like to talk about is that, you know, road cyclists, when they crash, they get new clothes.
Yeah.
If you crash on your road bike, you're going to scrub on the pavement.
You're going to eat through your clothing.
Yeah, pretty much in the most minor of crashes, you're going to have to replace your clothes. So in mountain biking, you know, we're having low speed crashes all the time. I mean, if you're not crashing, you're not trying. And you're going to be in the bushes and you're going to brush up against the tree and you're going to fall in that rock. So Xander wanted clothes that would withstand that kind of rugged use. And you wouldn't have to get new clothes every time you crashed. So we've got customers out there that are wearing the same shorts that they bought in 2012, 2013, 2014 today, years later, hundreds, maybe thousands of rides later. And that's because we chose the best fabrics around. And one of the characteristics we chose for was ruggedness and durability. I wish I could say that the company was founded to be a sustainable company, but it turns out that if you make a super durable piece of apparel that lasts twice as long as the other choices you might have had, you've cut your carbon impact on the planet in half. If it lasts twice as long, I mean, the math is pretty simple. If the pair of shorts lasts for 4 years, that's another 4 shorts that didn't have to be made, didn't have to be purchased. So we're huge fans of durability and multiple uses for one item. Wear it into the bar, wear it on a hike, wear it on your bike.
But as far as sustainability for my company goes, you cut your sales in half potentially with that as well,
Yes, but hopefully we gain a lifelong customer.
which is even better.
We don't really look at each sale. We're not short sighted in that way. We're really thinking about lifetime value of the customer. In fact, we have a friendly argument going on inside the company right now. What is the lifetime value of a Kitsbow customer? And what I say is we don't know because we've only been in business for 8 years.
So, what's your cycling background like?
Oh, mine personally?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've been riding a bike since I was a little kid. One of the reasons why I like to ride is even today, and I'll turn 60 soon. Even today, every time I get on the bike, the first 10 minutes, I feel like I'm 9 years old again. I mean, it's just a thrill. It never gets old. And unless the ride goes past about 4 or 5 hours, I love my bike. Whatever bike I'm currently riding, I have a little love affair with it. It takes you places, feel the wind on your face. I love speed. It's pretty cool. I will say that when I moved to Western North Carolina, I really only rode up hills in order to go down them. I got to the top of one hill one day and I finally caught up with my now wife and I said, man, that was a pretty good climb. And that's when I slapped myself because I had definitely gone over to the dark side. So now I actually really do enjoy the climbing as much as the descending. And I'm not really an athlete. I just like long bike rides.
What is your favorite go-to trail right now?
My favorite go-to trail right now is this is kind of embarrassing, but it's my commute route. So
Okay.
I commute most days, and I ride through the Pisgah National Forest, up a gentle rise, and then bomb down into Old Fort.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, I climb that back again, and that's 1,400 feet climb back. It's 12 miles each direction. More than half the ride in each direction is in the National Forest. It just never fails to put me in a good mood.
I mean, that's what we do it for.
Exactly.
What's right now your favorite bike that you enjoy riding? What is that bike?
Well, I've been doing that commuting on an e-bike.
Okay.
And I'm using the e-bike because it crushes my total commute time to an hour and 20 minutes. And if I didn't do it, it'd be 3 hours. And that's not really practical with a full-time job.
It's kind of not, no.
I'm 31 to 34 minutes in and 38 to 42 minutes back up the hill. When I get home, I can barely stand up because I pretty much go to the max all the way home. That's my workout, my daily workout. And that bike is a Reese Mueller from Germany.
Okay.
And it is built like a tank. It weighs 72 pounds dry. I'm normally riding at 80 to 85 pounds. I can do our weekly grocery big shop with the bike, and I do. And so I didn't expect to love the e-bike. It was more of a tool, my daily driver for commuting.
Yeah.
But if you think riding any bike is fun for the first 10 minutes, like you were 9 years old, wait until you can go 28 miles an hour. So I go uphill 18 miles an hour pedaling hard. And I'm just having a ball with that bike. I'm a little embarrassed by how often I ride it.
Well, hey, you bought it to enjoy it, so
It's true.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
Moving Kitsbow operations across the country sounds like a logistical nightmare. Obviously the presence of surplus and unused textile infrastructure, along with the easier to achieve cost of living, made North Carolina an attractive option. But were there other locations on the table? And if so, what made Old Fort kind of the sweet option?
Old Fort wasn't even on the list.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a pretty good story. I moved out here 12 years ago from the Seattle area, and I really fell in love with the location. And my wife and I really, really dug in. And so when I was asked to help run Kitsbow, I did it remotely from Western North Carolina. I did that for about 6 months before agreeing to move to California and do it full time. So we move out to California, working full time, and I realized that this apparel business model where you order the clothes 9 or 12 months in advance and they're made somewhere else and then brought back to the United States in bulk wasn't sustainable. It ties up all your operating cash and inventory, and you end up with these terrible situations where you have clothes you can't sell. So the company had already begun experimenting with making its own clothes. It was making about 15% of its revenue from clothes it made in California in its own facility. So as we studied that business model, we could see that was sustainable.
Okay.
Because now all you do is you invest in the raw materials. And then once you get an order, then you make the clothes. That made to order model improves the cash flow tremendously. It also means that you have almost no or zero wasted clothes. And to this date, we have not written off any of our clothes or destroyed them. So we don't have to discount, let alone trash clothes that don't sell, because we never made them under that model. So we moved the company to a new location to fully commit to nearly 100% made to order ourselves. So that was the business plan. I raised more money from the current investors and from new investors to move to a new location. I knew Appalachia would be the general location. We looked at Tennessee and South Carolina, but we really focused on Virginia and North Carolina. And we had 10 locations on the short list for North Carolina and Virginia. And I would say as late as July of 2019, I thought we were going to Virginia, to Freeze, Virginia.
Oh, okay. I know where Freeze is. Yeah.
A beautiful location, a workforce there in Galax.
That's actually where some of my family's from.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So Galax in Hillsville. Yeah.
So people who are there now are probably not going to move away. It's going to be a stable workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And Virginia was very accommodating, attractive economic incentives. So we flew out in June of 2019 to look at the 10 shortlist locations, one of which was Marion, North Carolina. And as we looked at Marion, the economic development fellow, Chuck Abernathy, said, "Have you considered Old Fort?" And I said, "Well, I ride my bike through Old Fort all the time. It's dead." He says, "Well, that's true. It is, but it's going to turn around." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "There's going to be a brewery, and a state law is changing that's going to allow a brewery to be in a dry town in a dry county." And I said, "Well, tell me more." And he says, "Well, why don't we go look at it? I think there's a building you'll like. And do you remember the Parker Building?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I know the Parker Building."
Yeah, because you would see it. Yeah.
Once a week, actually, on Wednesdays. We drive over to the Parker Building, and I tell people all the time, it's kind of like that scene in the movie Ghostbusters where Dan Aykroyd comes down the fire pole and says, "We got to get it." It was kind of like that. We walked onto the floor, and this is a factory warehouse, but it had never been used with machines. It had been used for storage. So it was relatively clean and blank. And we could see that we could build our new factory here. And as we started to compare the two finalists, Freeze, Virginia and Old Fort, North Carolina, we just saw more and more reasons to come. And one of the more compelling ones is that we're surrounded on three sides by national forest, but we're also commute distance from our production workforce, which is in Old Fort and East, all the way to Hickory.
Okay.
And we're also commute distance to Asheville. Our young, hip and alive management team probably wants to live in Asheville and commute into Old Fort. And our production team probably wants to walk, ride their bike, or drive a short distance to their job in Old Fort. So it's a Goldilocks location in that we're near a significant urban center, and we're also out in the countryside.
Yeah, you're also close to mountain bike trails that's your customer base.
Well, here's another little dirty secret. Where Kitsbow is headquartered in Northern California, in Petaluma, is a beautiful town. And like many locations in California, it's a 20-minute drive in your car to get to your first legal single-track mountain bike.
There is that about the Bay Area. Yep.
So here we are 2 miles from a gravel road that goes to the Blue Ridge Parkway, Curtis Creek. We're 2 miles from Kitsuma, one of the best single tracks in the South. We're 2 miles from Mill Creek, which is another gravel road. And then there's a plethora of other single track, either currently or proposed, all within 1 or 2 miles of our front door. So your lunch ride can be on Kitsuma, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, very awesome. What was the moment like when you finally committed to moving Kitsbow across the country and choosing Old Fort? Was building up to it stressful, and was it finally a relief to commit to moving?
It was definitely a relief to get out of the Northern California bubble. It is difficult to really adequately explain. The people who are there, they're like frogs in hot pot of water.
Just cooking themselves.
They're numb to how crazy it is. Coming from West North Carolina out to California for a year, I don't want to disparage anyone, but I would call Petaluma the home of the $50 mediocre lunch for two. Everything is just so expensive. Young professionals living 4 people to a suburban tract house and paying $1,200, $1,400 a month each in rent. I mean, this is crazy. And it meant that we could not have a workforce. A lot of people assume that we got lower costs when we moved to North Carolina. That is absolutely true. But we got was an available workforce. We could not hire people to so close in Northern California. That bubble is just too expensive. It's a gorgeous place, and there are plenty of fine people, but it's just not viable for a manufacturing operation, and a little bit crazy, frankly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. Old Fort is such a cool small mountain town, but it's not gotten any younger. The town
No.
hasn't seemed to have attracted many newcomers or kept its younger generations around for decades. So, what challenges does Kitsbow see in its future plans to cultivate the culture of town and cycling and the outdoor community?
So when we got here, it was because it was good for us.
Hmm.
And within about a month, we realized that maybe we could be good for the town. I spent a fair amount of energy the first couple of months complaining. There's no sign ordinance. So there's a giant Hardee's sign, like 150 feet in the air in the middle of town. So you can see it from the interstate. It's
Yep.
just so ugly. And that's because there's no sign ordinance. There's no noise ordinance.
Hmm.
There's weeds growing up on the sidewalk because there's no funding to keep the town clean. The statistics are clear. It's on a 30-year decline. I used to complain about all those things. I don't complain about it anymore. Now I think we have an amazing opportunity, precisely because the town was really abandoned by its leaders and allowed to grow weeds, means that it's a blank canvas.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we can have the right kind of affordable housing that's suitable to workers who want to walk to work or drive a short distance. We can have the right kind of businesses. We can have a noise ordinance that protects us from a loud rock and roll bar. We can have traffic calming on the streets. We've got a blank canvas here, and we intend to make the most of it. And we really imagine that in 20 years, it is a mountain town like you see in the West and some places in the East, but it's been thoughtful about the growth, so that the people who work in the town can still afford to live in the town, that it's been thoughtful about how we use our bodies to get around. The default here, when we first got here, if I was in the crosswalk, I would be honked at for being in the way,
Yeah.
right? So again, initially that really frankly pissed me off. But as I came to understand, these are people who grew up, got their driver's licenses and started driving and had never seen anyone cross the street
Hmm.
because nobody was walking because there was nowhere to walk to. All the businesses were closed. So now we're here and there's an opportunity to do that better. And maybe we shouldn't cross the street at that location. Maybe that is not the best solution for the drivers, and strike compromises. And it's pretty exciting. There are planning experts that are coming to Old Fort and offering their services. There are multiple foundations that are offering to fund renewal that is thoughtful and has equity for all participants in the town, that protect those housing costs. So I think this is more than an experiment. I think it's an opportunity and really thoughtful growth. And I grew up in a small town myself. I've gravitated to small towns. I would work in the big city for a while and then go to a small town, 5 to 10,000 people, multiple times in my life. And I really feel like we can be part of this community. So Kitsbow's not profitable yet. We're still a startup in the sense that we have to prove ourselves and become a profitable and sustainable company. But we've already made charitable donations to construction of trails and the development here in town to make it a more livable place. Multiple employees are involved in all of those activities. We hear a lot of gratitude from old-time residents of the town for how we've turned it around, but we feel the same kind of gratitude that it's here for us to develop. And the town has been, in an odd way, preserved. So now we can do it right.
And it does seem like the Old Fort is on the move. I mean, you guys move in and set up shop. The sale of alcohol is legalized. G5 Trail Collective drops this amazing map on us with, a bunch of new trails in the forest, which isn't something that happens often in these parts. Were these things that you guys had a hand in or knew about? And kind of what other surprises do you guys have up your sleeves for us?
Well, we have a new company in town, Triple Aught Design, which, like Kitsbow, was founded about the same time. In fact, we share some of the same fabric suppliers, downtown San Francisco. And the founder and CEO of Triple Aught called me within a month of our announcement here because he knew us. And we had a long phone call and we talked about some of the same stuff you and I just talked about. And I think it was a month ago, they announced that they were moving to Old Fort, and they're actually moved in down at the end of the same block we're on. So They're not going to move their entire company. They've just moved manufacturing.
Okay.
But I believe they have 9 or 10 employees on the ground already in the first month. So that's 9 or 10 more jobs.
Yeah.
So they're the second production facility that's new in Old Fort in 30 years. There are 2 other companies, I can't reveal their names, that have also interviewed me and have been to Old Fort and looked around. I don't know whether they'll pull the trigger, but they're both in the outdoor industry. And I think there's a lot of commonality there, being part of a national forest, being part of the G5 Trail Collective, a town with a blank canvas. So yeah, I think things are on the improvement. We didn't have anything directly to do with the brewery, even though we share a loading dock. And we try to partner together on a number of things because, of course, beer goes with bikes and bikes go with beer. There's a second brewery now being under construction about 2 blocks away. So Old Fort is growing, and commercial real estate prices, I'm told by the realtors, have already doubled. It's taken off, and that's pretty exciting. Did we have anything to do with it? Our role is pretty modest. We're obviously not shy about talking about how much we love Old Fort and what we're doing. I think that's how we help the most. We have contributed money to the G5 Trail Collective, but the historically Black neighborhoods here, those people of color have their own nonprofit. And so far, they're the biggest donor to the trail development.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And an interesting turn of events.
Yeah.
And they, too, see the growth of their town as a tourist destination, as a trail town. The local community college is in the final stages of getting a grant to establish a satellite location in the downtown, in fact, in the old town fire station, to teach certified trail building. And that'll be the second location anywhere in the state where you'll be able to get certified as a trail builder, because they're in short supply, as it turns out. If you're going to build a trail right now, you're looking, someone told me the other day, 18 or 19 month wait to get a contractor, and you'll probably only get 1 bid.
Yeah.
So that's coming to Old Fort too. It's exciting.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of wonderful things here in these mountains of North Carolina to pull inspiration from. Other than the COVID-19 pandemic, what factors have played a part in new product development at Kitsbow?
Oh, that's a great topic. And, as the CEO, I don't actually do anything. So we really need our product designers to be part of that conversation. They can explain it better than I. But we only had 1 employee take a very generous relocation package to move from California to Old Fort. But even she has experienced firsthand our summer weather.
Yeah.
And that is changing the kind of clothes that we make and the design of those clothes, so that this morning it was 23 degrees at our house. By June, as you well know, it's going to be 80 and humid. And so having that full suite of environmental conditions with the same pieces of clothing. So we're big fans of merino wool combined with a synthetic to give it some stretch and some durability. And those are clothes you can wear from 20 degrees all the way up to maybe 60, maybe even 65 before they're too warm. That's just one of many examples where the clothes are being definitely inspired by these eastern mountain conditions that really you don't have anything like that in California. It's way drier.
So far in your Western North Carolina experiences, what trails, gravel routes, road rides, etc., in Western North Carolina, what do they call to the spirit of Kitsbow the best?
Oh, I really don't feel qualified to say. I think the pandemic is a factor here.
Okay.
In that we have so many new riders and they don't want to wear those bicycle clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we all know, all of us who ride bikes, that they need the performance, they need the functionality of clothes that are thoughtful about a bike.
Yes.
So if they're going to be on gravel, then they're probably going to need a chamois pad because they're going to have to be sitting in order to maintain traction on hills.
Mm-hmm.
In single track mountain biking, you don't really need a chamois pad because you're hardly ever sitting. So if you're going to wear a chamois pad and you haven't done that before, whose are you going to wear? And I don't think you're going to wear roadie clothes. You're just going to suffer unless you come to Kitsbow. And we can set you up with a liner and then a normal looking short on the outside of that. And no one will even know that you're wearing a chamois pad. But you'll have the performance functionality that you need to have a better day on a long gravel ride. A second area that's pretty inspiring right now is if you don't have that traditional bike jersey, where do you put your phone?
Yeah.
We're working on solutions for where you can stash the phone on your body. And we've partnered with Swift Industries in Seattle for a Kitsbow specific hip pack so that you can wear Kitsbow clothes that don't have those back pockets yet still have your stuff with you in that pack. Those are some of the inspiring issues. Is there a way to carry a third water bottle because it's going to be a long day and you don't know where the water sources are going to be on the Blue Ridge? There's not a lot of available potable water on the Blue Ridge Parkway if the campgrounds are closed, just for example. I think those are some of the inspirations. We're taking a lot of our product names and color names from the Blue Ridge Mountains. We're choosing colors that are definitely inspired by the color palette that you see in the mountainous South. So those are all components of being here.
That's cool to hear. Kitsbow seems to have a lot of development going on with more than just apparel. What's your big push for the progression of your manufacturing process?
So the first thing we needed to do is we needed to relearn how to make the clothes. So we were making about 20 styles that accounted for about 15% of our revenue in California. And by the time we left California, it was up to about 20 or 25% of our revenue. It was just ticking up because we were making more of it. But we couldn't hire anyone. We got to like 4.5 people. And that was it. There were a couple of part-timers, 3 full-timers, and that's it. We just can't find anybody else who can sew. So here, we both had to train people to sew and find sewers that we could hire and relearn how to make those clothes. None of the manufacturing people moved from California. So that was our first step. And we were just starting to do that. And we had only one style, the icon shirt, like the one I'm wearing, that we were making here last December. And as we moved into January and February, we were making more and more of those icon shirts and filling back orders. And then the pandemic hit. So we did our now famous pivot into making PPE. And we did that 100% for months. And then in July, we started making our clothes again. And we would introduce a new style, and the sewers would have to learn how to make that style for the first time ever on all new sewing machines that we bought both before and during the pandemic. So now we're up to about 120 sewing machines. It's kind of boggles the eye. It fills 12,000 square feet of manufacturing floor. And we have over 30 people on the floor during the day shift. And we have a small swing shift now. So now we're making over 20 styles here in North Carolina. And when we send them out, they all go with a little tag with the initials of each person who worked on that particular shirt or pants or chamois liner or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that manufacturing process, we're following the Toyota way. So instead of batch, we make one perfect shirt and then we make another. And there might be one person doing that, or maybe a team of 2, or maybe as much as a team of 7. So the icon shirts require a team of 7 to make each one. There's a lot of pride in that craftsmanship. And now the objective of our business is to take that craftsmanship and that methodology and turn up the speed. I think we're down to about 3 hours to make an icon shirt.
Okay.
I mean, these are handmade, artisan. I mean, these are the quality, the stitching is at the quality of a dress shirt. Many of our styles have that level of quality. And now we have to turn up the speed in order for that to be a profitable, sustainable business.
For those that don't know what all goes into the manufacturing of your product, what's the best way to describe the process that lets a potential customer understand the value of your products? Because they're not cheap.
No, they're not. There's really 3 components. There's 3 aspects. One is I love to take people through our warehouse where we store the raw materials because there's hundreds of rolls of fabric and they come from all over the world. If you've seen or you own the icon shirt, I think it's kind of humbling to realize the mesh that's inside the lining at the shoulders is from Italy, because that's where we found the best mesh that would stand up to the use and had the quality that we needed. We chose that mesh almost without regard for the price of it. And that's why we have to import it from Italy. The snaps that go down the front, and we use snaps instead of buttons, so you can one-handed open your shirt for ventilation while you're riding your bike. And buttons take two hands. So those snaps, they're the best snaps in the world. They're from Japan. The elastic is from Italy. The wool is from Portland, Oregon. It's from Pendleton Woolen Mills. So that's very American. But the liner is from Switzerland. And the arm patches, they're super tough, so that when you brush up against a thorn bush, they generally will not snag. And it was originally developed for the military. And we're using it as the arm patches and the shoulder patches on the shirt so that the shirt will last for years. They're made in Switzerland. Who knew anything was even made in Switzerland other than watches? So the first component is, what are the raw ingredients and were they chosen appropriately? Then the second piece is the construction I was just describing. There's a huge array of stitches and seams and techniques for construction. And we want something that looks great, has that timeless style, but is also durable. So a lot of work goes in. Multiple generations prototypes are made of each new style before we go into final production to make sure that we've done that right balance between durability and looking good. Then the third component, and this is the hardest one of all to explain to our prospective customers and even our current customers, because we are a digital brand. We only sell at kitsbow.com. The hardest of all is the fit.
Yeah.
And you really have to be a customer and go on at least 1 or 2 or 100 bike rides to start to appreciate this thing fits fantastic. And we define fit as you don't notice you're wearing it. So I'll just give you one of many, many examples. All of our shorts, the cut across the back of the knee, the back of the leg opening, they're long to protect your quads and your hamstrings because it's for mountain biking. They come down to your knee, but not over your knee because we don't want to bind as you're pedaling. But the cut of the back of the leg opening is scalloped upwards a little bit, so you don't have that annoying little touch on the back of your knee and that sensitive skin all day long on every pedal stroke of the back of the leg bumping against the back of your leg. That's crazy detail.
It is.
I mean, that's obsessive, but it's one of multiple things we've done on the shorts so that they disappear. And you can focus on the riding or walking or hiking or hanging out the bar, and you're not noticing your clothes.
I was trying to pull it up right quick while you were talking. What's the retail price of that shirt?
$220.
And
hasn't changed in years. And eventually that's going to change. It's
okay.
We're undercharging for an amazing product.
I don't own one. I've definitely checked them out before at the right house and seen the quality that they are. I see the value in it for sure. Kind of hard not to ask this one. Kitsbow was one of the leading companies in the Western North Carolina region to jump on working on COVID-19 protection gear. How did that come about, and what led you to push so hard to get those wheels turning?
We knew that COVID was real basically on February 20th, February 18th, because in the apparel business, there's the Lunar New Year, an annual lunar holiday. It's the only time that the factories close.
Mm-hmm.
And when they open, there's a flood of emails and phone calls because they're back in business.
Yeah.
And at the end of the lunar year, this year in 2020, they did not reopen. They did not return our phone calls. We couldn't get those snaps reordered from Japan. Everything was shut down. So despite what we were all seeing in the media, is this real or not? Will it cross borders? Remember, there's a big debate. Would it become a pandemic or was it just an epidemic?
Yeah.
We knew it was a pandemic before it was technically a pandemic because Asia was truly shut down, which no one had ever experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
So we took it seriously and we began COVID precautions on March 3rd here at Kitsbow in the factory, because we knew that if we had a case, and remember, there's no test at the time.
Yeah.
We knew if we had a case, we'd basically have to send everybody home. If we sent everybody home, we'd not be able to make product anymore. And pretty soon we wouldn't be able to have revenue anymore. And we're really pretty fragile, right? We've been in business in Old Fort for 4 months.
Yeah.
4 months. I mean, blink of an eye and it's over.
Mm-hmm.
So we took it seriously. We began precautions right away. We agonized about whether we should have temporary furlough because remember, there's no CARES Act.
Yep. No CARES Act yet.
There's no support of any kind from the government. And we had a board meeting where we discussed layoffs and decided to hold on. Right after that board meeting, Xander, the founder, the guy who had the crazy idea to start the company in the first place, sends an email and says, here are some plans that I got from my Stanford design network for making face shields. And we have all the equipment to make these. We have all these new machines here in Old Fort, and we can make these face shields. So the team here jumped on it. And that afternoon, we ordered everything we needed that we didn't already have. and ordered it FedEx overnight delivery. It came on Friday morning, and we started making face shields Friday morning. And then we realized we're going to need more of some of the ingredients, including the plastic and the foam. And we went where our supply chain team, we have 2 people working on purchasing. They jump on the internet to go buy some more, and America is out.
Oh,
Like in 24 hours, it was sold out of that particular kind of plastic that the FDA wants you to use for face shields.
mm-hmm.
Foam in America was out. It had all been purchased. We found out later that some of the people we were pounding on to sell us supplies here in America were getting 300 and 400 phone calls a day.
Wow.
In the same way that we could start making shields in 24 hours, there were a lot of companies who could do that. In fact, there were some other companies here in Asheville who were doing that. And eventually we would team up with them. That confirmed that we really had something. So we made plans to work that weekend. And we also we started prototyping face masks. Again, widely available patterns. We partnered with a physician who had started about 2 weeks earlier to make face masks with volunteers in Western North Carolina. She was very generous and shared her advice as well as her patterns, asked us hard questions. And by Saturday, we were making our first face masks. And I took a picture of the crew working on Saturday. That picture went viral on Facebook
It did.
from my personal account. So what's crazy about that story is, like, we have a PR agency. We have a Kitsbow Facebook account. That's not where the news spread. The news spread on Facebook on my personal page, which is usually dogs and what I made for dinner and my bike rides. Seriously, you can go back and see it. That's all it is.
But that's how social media works.
It is.
A lot of times the viral stuff comes from just a person.
Well, in this particular case, because I moved here from Seattle and because I spent a lot of time in California and because I have friends all over the world and because I have this other life as a first responder and many of my buddies in venture capital married physicians, I didn't completely appreciate how many medical professionals and how many first responders are either first or second degree friends of mine on Facebook. And at the time, so it's March 21st now, they can't get PPE. They can't get N95 masks. And it appears, we would get verification of this later, but it appears our masks, when you put a HEPA filter in them, are basically N95. We can't say that. We can't advertise that. But eventually we had it measured by an independent lab. And sure enough, it's N95. We were N94.6 or something like that. It was good enough.
Yeah.
So the word spreads on Facebook that we might be able to help. And I call some of the first responders locally in Western North Carolina that I know and work with, and I ask them about appetite. We haven't even figured out how much we're going to charge. We're just trying to help. And they make it very clear they'll take as much as we can make. So right then we make the decision we're only making it for medical professionals and for first responders. And our customer service person full time for the next month, all she does is vet people to make sure that they're appropriate. And for 3 months, we only sell to professionals. So that's how it took off. I mean, Sunday afternoon, I got a phone call from the Dogwood Trust, and they placed an order for 20,000.
Wow.
And then another 20,000 later the next week. And then thousands were being ordered by local area first responders and friends in medical professions, both in New York City and back in Seattle. Remember, Seattle had their outbreak.
Yep.
Very terrifying. So we knew we had a business. I've been in business now for almost 40 years, and I've never had 0 to 20,000 orders in a single day. That's really the pivot.
Yeah. And that's the craziness of this pandemic, is how it's changed business.
So first we were making 200 a day, and then we were making 500 a day. Then we were making 2,000 a day, and we had a swing shift going. And last summer was just a blur.
Who have been some of the people and organizations that have helped Kitsbow get to where it is today, and most importantly, brought you to Old Fort?
Well, if Chuck Abernathy hadn't said, "Have you considered Old Fort?" we wouldn't be here. I mean, he is not figuratively, he is literally the reason why we're in Old Fort. So economic development people in every county and state act sort of like Uber real estate agents. They're trying to help businesses find workforces, bare land to build, or buildings to occupy. And Chuck had a very special background. He ran McDowell County for years as the county administrator. And this is his retirement job, being the economic development guy. So he knows all the buildings and he knows all the people. He knows the workforce. And so that was obvious to us. He wasn't a policy wonk. He wasn't an administrative bureaucrat. He loves McDowell County. He lives here. He knows everybody. And that gave us the confidence that of the things that he was telling us were true. And they were. The second component is that the Parker family, specifically Jeff Parker and Amy Parker, brother and sister, they own this building, this city block, and a couple of other buildings here in Old Fort. And they have been working tirelessly to build up Old Fort for over a decade. And there's been a lot of resistance because they want to do new things. And as I previously said, the town leadership historically has not wanted anything to change. The fact that they persevered before we got here and then helped us once we did, and they continue to help us. Jeff was helping us this morning. That has been huge. I've never experienced a commercial landlord as involved in the town and in the business and in the facilities as these two are. So that's huge. The third piece is the local community college, McDowell Technical. They've been very involved in helping us find employees and helping us train employees. There's a COVID related plan right now that helps pay for on-the-job training to get people out of unemployment and into businesses like ours. We wouldn't have even known about that. We don't have time to look at that kind of stuff. Not only did the college and NC Works, the state agency, come to us with that program, they help us administer it so that the paperwork is a minimum. So that's just a good start of what we experience here in Old Fort. In larger Western North Carolina, the Outdoor Gear Builders Association, the OGB, innovative idea. We're not the first outdoor recreation company to come to Western North Carolina. In fact, I think we're about the 50th. We're just the first one in Old Fort.
Yeah.
So the OGB is a very active organization that's far more than a trade association. It puts on the annual Outdoor Economy Conference. And this year was the third year of that, I believe, and it had to be virtual online. But it's now a national level stature event that started here in Western North Carolina by companies that in the industry that were already here. So we get a lot of moral support and a lot of physical support. And during the pandemic, we partnered with, I think, 4 of those companies to make PPE together. So it's definitely a community. I can't recall anyone in Northern California coming over to help.
It seems like Old Fort welcomed you with open arms.
Indeed. And Western North Carolina.
Yeah. What's the best way for people to follow along with what Kitsbow has going on?
Well, there's a couple of things to do. One is to come visit the Old Fort Ride House. We've made sure that that's a safe experience. We designed it for sweaty cyclists not to be self-conscious. So there's lots of open air seating that's cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And that's the same recipe for social distancing and staying safe. So coming to the Ride House is really the only place in the world where you can, as you apparently have, is the only place in the world where you can come and touch and feel an Icon shirt before you buy one. We also give factory tours. They have to be COVID safe. So we don't take you onto the floor, but we take you to the floor and you get to see your clothes being made, which is pretty cool. And if you come during lunchtime, you can meet some of the people who make your clothes because they'll be eating in the Ride House themselves. So coming to the Ride House is a pretty good thing to do. The next best thing to do is to follow us on social media. We're on all the usual channels, and there's lots of stories in depth there about customers, about people who work here. So that's a great way to understand what we're doing and the community we're creating. And then the third way, of course, is go to kitsbow.com. There's something called the Journal that you can subscribe to there, and then you'll get our emails. We send a lot of emails. I'll just warn you. But we try to make sure that they're a mix of entertainment and commerce. So Lots of information about our community, lots of information about riding, exploring, the things that we love about bicycles, and the things we love about clothes. So there's a steady stream of stuff to read via email.
David, you're a very interesting guy. You've got a very interesting background. Do you have any public social media channels if people wanted to keep up with what you're up to?
Well, they can follow me on Facebook. Since March 21st and that picture went viral, I do use my Facebook account as a way of talking about Kitsbow, I do Kitsbow updates. And this time of year, every morning at 6:30 or so, you'll find a single quote from the movie Elf.
All right. That's not a bad thing. Well, great. David, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure meeting you over the internet here and hearing some of your backstory and learning more about Kitsbow.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
So, Drew, other than some of the winter riding gear we discussed earlier, what's the oldest bit of riding clothing you own?
Well, I've got a good one. If you've ever seen me out at an event like the Icicle, you may have seen me break this one out. But I've got a thermal long sleeve Team Fat Chance jersey from the 90s that my old pal Mark gave me a long time ago. And every once in a while, I'll break it out on a ride.
Oh, nice. Look at that.
Yeah, how about you?
And I've got this older pair of Specialized shorts, but they've got some wear on them. They may have another season of life left in them. And I believe I got those in 2016. So they're not very old. Of course, I've not been mountain biking very long. So that's sadly my oldest piece of gear.
Well, we all get old and worn out eventually. And on that note, that wraps up this week's episode.
As always, you can follow us on the social medias. Just search Pisgah Podcast.
If you've ever spent a fortune on warm riding gear just to get too hot and stuff it in your pack for the rest of the ride, go ahead and click subscribe.
I've done that. Yep, and then I got cold later.
Yeah, so there's nothing like getting bundled up for a ride and then you get hot on the climb, get nice and sweaty, you just get cold on the descent.
And I've been bitten by that one way too many times, so that's why I bring that second pair of gloves now.